Hi everyone, tarekith here, and today we're going to be looking at the ASM Hydrasynth. I've had this for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks now. It's a really easy synth to figure out, so I feel like I have pretty good knowledge of how this thing works and wanted to share it with you. I'll admit when this first came out, it didn't really catch my eye too much. I thought it was just another synth jumping on the wavetable bandwagon. I had a couple things that intrigued me, which I'll talk about in a second, but overall just kind of fell under my radar. Like I wasn't really that interested in it. And then I randomly started hearing more and more videos featuring the Hydrasynth, and I actually really liked the way it sounded. And the more I kind of looked into its capabilities, the more impressed I was, so I decided to give it a try. The module version was, I think, around $800, which isn't too bad. I think actually it's a pretty fair price, a really fair price, actually, considering how much power is in this thing. So it was something I knew I could flip if I didn't like it, as you all know I do quite frequently. But I've been really impressed with it. The more I get to know it, the more I think that it's designed really well. A lot of thought went into making things as easy and quick as possible to do. Even though there's a big reliance on generic kind of panel layout with these 8 encoders and, scribble strips, it's actually really well thought out and really, really fun to use, if I'm honest. So let's kind of dive in a little bit, talk about what I like, what I don't like, a little bit about how it's laid out and how it works. To start with the hardware like normal, the hardware is really good. The case is all metal. It's got these aluminum end cheeks. It weighs quite a bit. It's super solid. It feels really good. One of the kind of strange things with this is the back. I have it hooked up here, so it's not going to be easy to show you, but maybe I can tilt it. All the connections are recessed in the back, so it's nice for some things if you're going to rack mount it, for instance. But like for reaching the power strip, like you have to stick your hand way in the back to turn it on or off, which is just a little strange to me, the way it's set up like that. The other thing that's kind of strange too is the power cable is an external power supply, and it's the smallest external power supply I've ever seen. Like the power cable is super, super thin, and the little wall wart plug thing is really small as well, which that part's fine, but this cable is just really tiny. On the plus side, they do give you a cable lock on the back, so it's not easy to pull out. You can't like mistakenly pull it out if you're like on stage or something like that. So, it works fine, but I was just kind of surprised. Like everything is so beefy and solid on this, and then you get to the power supply and it's just kind of flimsy. Hopefully it's not going to be a problem in the long term, but thought I would point that out because it stood out to me when I first got it. In terms of how everything feels, like, yeah, the buttons all feel solid. They're really bright. If you want them to be bright, or you can make them, oops, turn that off, or you can make them dim. I've got a latch on. You can change the brightness of the pads you play as well. So the buttons feel good. That thing's freaking out. The knobs feel really good. Actually, these are, like I said, endless encoders. They've got LEDs that go around them. They're easily the best like kind of encoders I've ever felt. Like they feel super, super solid. Like some of the higher end pots, like on the Sequential Gear or the Access Virus, had really nice feeling pots, I thought. And these are right up with them for being encoders. I was really impressed. They have a nice kind of solid feel to them. They don't wiggle at all. They're rubberized on the outside, but they have these nice aluminum tops. Like I was really impressed. It feels really good. Over here we've got non-encoders for the filter controls. One thing I kind of like about this synth is the encoders and like the regular pots, they feel the same resistance. They're the same shape and everything. So even though they're kind of two totally different kinds of controls, they feel the same. So it's nice. Like you kind of get that muscle memory built up pretty quick. But yeah, the pots feel great. You've got this kind of scroll wheel for accessing longer lists in here, like presets and things like that. It's okay. It's clicky. I don't normally like kind of clicky encoders, but it works. And there's also this kind of LED ring around it. And you can define the color. There's like 30 some colors you can choose when you save a preset. So you can actually color code your presets. And I believe on the keyboard version, the mod wheel and the pitch bend wheel also have color lights that match whatever you select for this. So a nice little touch for kind of personalizing like your patches if you want to make like all your bass lines purple or something weird like that. The display is really crisp. There's two basic displays. There's the one here for the 8 generic controllers that you do most of your tweaking with, and then there's also this kind of center display which usually functions like an oscilloscope. Considering how you can radically alter your oscillators, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I think that's actually really useful. The other thing that's nice for the display is you can use it for like visualizing the filter. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a nice little touch. I like it. It's responsive. It looks really good. It's bright. It's clear. These buttons over here that you use to select all the different modules, which I'll talk about again here shortly, they all feel good. They're lit up, and the lights are actually really useful. As you can see, the LFOs down here on the bottom, these 5 LFOs, you can actually see the LFO speed just by how quickly they're blinking, which is really nice for kind of when you have like complex patches. You can see which LFOs are making that one parameter change that you want to get rid of. Same with the envelopes. If you watch, if I play, the envelopes change brightness intensity based on where they are like in the envelope cycle. So you can see again like what your envelopes are doing as you're just playing, just by looking at this kind of module select thing. That's a really nice feature. I think that it's really, really handy. The pads themselves, this is what really intrigued me about the Hydrasynth the first time I saw it. There was a playing surface built into a small module. I love using my OB6 kind of like a standalone groove box, but I always have to pre-program sequences into the sequencer like ahead of time because there's no way of entering notes without using like a controller keyboard. So I love the fact that I don't actually need a controller keyboard on this. The pads, you know, once they got broken in, which took a little time, like they feel really good. And again, they have polyphonic aftertouch. You do have to press kind of hard to trigger that. There's some different settings. There's like a threshold for the aftertouch and stuff like that you can configure more. But in general, you have to press a little hard to get the aftertouch to trigger. But it's really responsive once you do. It's also, this keyboard will output MPE and it responds to MPE as well. So if that's something you're concerned about, this covers your bases there. In addition, you also got CV inputs and outputs, CV and gate inputs and outputs, excuse me. So if you have like a modular setup, this is a great way to play that or interface with that too. Really well thought out. One of the things I like about this panel is there's a lot of like buttons that come in handy, just they're in the right place, and there's some useful functions you don't see in other synths, or maybe they're buried in menus. There's an exit button, so no matter where you are, if you're editing things, it's easy just to exit and get back to the main parameter page. You can have 8 macros for each preset, and those macros are on this kind of main parameter page, they're already pre-assigned. All the presets come pre-assigned with macros, and you can do a lot of editing and, you know, really deep tweaking just with those macros, so that's handy to be able to just instantly jump back out. One of the other things I think is kind of cool is they have buttons for initialize and random. So I can just initialize a preset by just double clicking it. I can randomize a preset by doing the same thing. But in addition to that, you can actually initialize and randomize just different modules. So if I wanted to initialize an oscillator, I could do that by holding the initialize button down and pressing a module. Same with the random, I could randomize the filter. So that's a useful feature. I think that's really cool. You can not only just quickly initialize a preset or randomize a preset, which is something I use a lot, but you can also do it just for specific sections. Like you don't see that very often. I think that's pretty cool. There's also dedicated buttons for the macro assign. When you want to assign your own macros, like I said, you can have 8 of them per preset. Mod matrix, there's a 32 slot mod matrix. It's got its own dedicated button. The layout's a little weird, but you can see it goes basically vertical. So poly aftertouch is controlling filters 1 cutoff at 24.2. And then use these page buttons to go further down into more slots in the mod matrix. Like I said, there's 32 of them. That's more than enough. One of the things that's nice about the mod matrix, as long as we're here, is if you want to assign, say, an LFO to the filter, you just hold the LFO button and then press filter. And now it automatically creates a routing for you in the mod matrix. Again, super useful, big time saver. You still have to choose exactly which parameter you want to control within, say, the filter. Like, you know, there's drive, resonance, cutoff, but at least it takes you to like assigning half of the parameters right away. And then again, here's your amount. So again, it's just really well thought out. There's a lot of little things like that that I think really make things easy. You know, they've thought a lot about how to make this as simple as possible to navigate. Speaking of navigation, we have the module select grid here, and this basically mimics the signal flow of the entire synth. So we have 3 oscillators, some mutators, they'll go into a mixer, you have 2 filters, an amplifier, and then you have some effect settings. So you can see the signal flow at a glance. I already mentioned how the lights flash, you know, in time with whatever's going on in the modulators, like the LFOs and envelopes. But, you know, it's just a really quick way to quickly access, like, say, oscillator. I can just jump to an oscillator. I can go to the mixer and raise oscillator 2. yeah, it's just a really nice way to visually see what's going on in a patch and then quickly access whatever you're trying to access with these 8 parameters. Let's talk about the signal flow a little bit deeper here. Sounds, basically, I said you have 3 oscillators. Oscillators 1 and 2 are identical. Those are kind of your more fully featured oscillators. Oscillator 3 just is basic wave shapes. I'm sorry, not basic wave shapes, but it's got only the wave shape mode called single, which I'll talk about in a second. You can't do some of the more complex things. In addition, there's no mutators on oscillator 3 either, although you can apply ring modulation. And additionally, there's a noise source as well. You can select the different types of noise if you want. Back to oscillator 1. There's 2 modes for the oscillators. There's single mode, where you can select a single wave shape. Let me just initialize a patch. I think there's a couple hundred different wave shapes in here. There's a huge variety. One of the interesting things about the single mode is not only can you select a wave shape, but you can actually modulate that as well. So if you wanted to assign like an LFO to change the waves, you could do that. So it's not quite as static as you think. The other mode that comes on each of the first 2 oscillators is what they call wave scan mode. And basically what happens is you have 8 slots that you can fill with any wave shapes you want. And these are the same wave shapes as single mode. And then you can interpolate between them. So it's kind of like you're making your own wavetable. So you press this button to enter that. You can see there's the 8 different waves, and you can just scroll and pick whichever ones you want for each of those. Again, there's a couple hundred different options. One of the interesting things, if you hold shift and turn a knob, it will not only change that slot of the 8, but the ones after it as well. So you can quickly assign multiple waves to all 8 slots at once this way, just for quickly getting ideas together. And then what we do once we've assigned 8 different slots is now we can actually scan through them. And again, this can be modulated. So it's a really nice way. You come up with your own kind of wavetables. It adds a ton of options. Like I said, there's a lot of different variety of like wave shapes you can choose from. And then we get into the mutators, which is probably like kind of like the one thing that the Hydrasynth does that most other synths do. It's sort of this unique feature. And basically these are different algorithms that impact how the oscillator is generated. There's other videos that go really into depth into this. So I'm not going to go through all of them like super. I'll do it super quick here, but there's a FM linear mode, wave stack, which is like, you can hear what it is. It's kind of chorusing, just add in different layers. The oscillator sync. You can choose different sources for the sync too. There's 3 different pulse widths, including this kind of unique ASM pulse width. And you can edit different like warp points that get applied to the signal. It gets really deep. Like again, I'm not going to go too deep into this. I don't even know if the manual explains properly like exactly what's going on with this. And then we have harmonic mode. You can choose different harmonics, and then a phase differential. So again, those are the options you have for the mutators. There's 2 mutators for each of the first 2 oscillators. So you can get some pretty crazy territory quite easily. Even though this is all kind of this digital distortion and fuckery, I think this synth actually sounds pretty good. Like it doesn't sound like overly harsh. Like I was kind of afraid it'd be like this digital harsh brightness, and it's not. It's actually, I kind of think the opposite. It's almost got like a bit of an analog vibe to it. Just then it just got like a little bit of a warmth to it, even though you can, you're really tweaking these oscillators digitally, and it makes no mention of trying to be an analog synth. It's fully digital. It sounds good. And then if you want to make it even like kind of more warm, if you go in the voice menu, there's like an analog feel that does some like kind of random detuning to give you that Boards of Canada thing. There's also a warm mode. It's subtle. It makes it a little more rounded, for lack of a better phrase. Even when I don't use the warm mode, I still think it sounds kind of warm. Like the filters themselves are really good. You can make it polyphonic, monophonic. You can change the density, detune it. There's stereo width parameter. And you have different options for how the actual voices will be placed in the stereo field. Like they'll rotate around it, they'll spread it wide, they'll be random. Again, these are all in the voice menu. So a ton of flexibility. Once you start, modulating some of these mutator things, like you start modulating the feedback or changing the dry wet control, like you can get a lot of movement in your synth patches before you even get to things like the effects, the arpeggiator, and the filter. Like you can achieve a lot of those same kind of things just with kind of random combinations of these mutators. It's really fun. It's really easy to use. It's very unique way of generating sounds. Sometimes it does get kind of crazy. It's not always the most intuitive, like I know how to make this sound. A lot of times I'm just experimenting and playing and coming up with random things that way. So it's pretty cool. Then we go into the mixer. You can mix all 3 oscillators levels. One thing I haven't found in the Hydrasynth, and I have a feeling it's got to be here, I'm just missing it. I haven't found like a global volume. Like I always have to kind of lower the oscillator volumes when things start getting too loud. And this is kind of a loud synth compared to some other synths I have. So it's got to be something obvious I'm missing. I can't believe they wouldn't have like a patch volume setting somewhere. But anyway, this is I find myself a lot to kind of turn things down when I'm in the mixer. Moving on to the filters. We have a lot of different filter types for filter 1. It's a low pass filter. You can see we have like a 12-pole ladder, 24-pole ladder, fat 12, fat 24. Gate MS-20 modeled. There's also high pass filter in there too, and band pass. So there's more than just that. And there's like a valve. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, a lot of filter types. I think they sound really good. Like I think ASM mentions in the manual that even though these are kind of like inspired by classic filters, they've tweaked them themselves to kind of give them their own spin and more modern take. I think they did a great job with that. They sound really good. They're really playable. I like the filters in this unit quite a lot, especially because filter number 2, when we go to that one, this is actually like a SEM style filter. So it's got multiple filter types built in. So you can morph between low pass, band pass, and high pass. And this is in addition to the first filter. So again, there's a lot of flexibility there. A lot of times, you know, you'll have a great, cool bass sound happen with the first filter, but then there's no way to kind of filter out subsonics and stuff like that. And that's really easy in this synth. Yeah, like I said, the filters sound really good. I'm really happy with them. There's also drive parameter on the filters. If I go to filter 1. Clipping a little bit there, so it sounds a little strange, but yeah, it's a really cool filter. I like it a lot. I've got the kind of an amp level. This is probably my general patch right there. Duh. Yeah, so this is just the amp parameter. Again, there's envelopes kind of pre-assigned for this. Envelope 2 is sort of pre-assigned to the amp for overall patch volume. Same with LFO 2. You can break those connections. You don't have to leave those assigned, but they just kind of do it for you to make things a little easier. Pretty long attack and decay times, a 36-second attack. The release time goes up to a full minute. They sound fine. They're nice and snappy, especially when you're kind of modulating some of the wavetable stuff and the mutator stuff. Like you get some really nice, interesting transients because of that. Again, we have 5 LFOs. LFOs are pretty complex. A lot of different shapes in here, which is useful. They can BPM sync. You can fade in and out. Yeah, you can also make them one-shot mode. You can make the LFOs act like envelopes, and conversely, you can make the envelopes act like LFOs by looping them. Again, quite a few parameters in here. We've got about, 16 parameters you can change for the LFOs and for the envelopes. And again, 5 of each, and that's per voice. This is an 8-voice synth, so having lots of modulation options is not an issue with this synth, which is another reason I like it. I never run out of LFOs. So after we come out of the amp stage, we're going to go into the pre-effects. There's a pre-effects and a post-effects, before and after the reverb and delay. They have the same effects for both. Bypass, so we have a chorus, flanger, rotary, phaser, like a lo-fi effect. Tremolo. There's an EQ, which is nice. Again, you can kind of shape your sound in finer detail if you have your filters being used for other things. There's a built-in compressor. It works okay. It's not something I use all the time on a synth, but it's cool to have it there. And again, you have all these effects types. You have 2 banks of those. You have one before the delay and reverb and one after. The delay is pretty cool. It's got a basic delay. And BPM sync it. Change the tone of the delay repeats, make it darker as they fade away. There's a stereo delay, pan delay. reverse delay. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff there. I like it. The reverb's got some cool tricks too. We have a hall reverb. Let me turn the delay off actually. Room plates. I don't normally like plate reverbs, but I actually really like the plate reverb in this one. This cloud reverb is pretty cool too. And you can do things like freeze the delay, or I'm sorry, the reverb. Yeah, lots of fun stuff here. This is like an ambient generating machine. I love that aspect of it. And then again, like I said, after the delay and reverb, you have another effects if you want to use that as well. So yeah, that's the basic kind of setup of the signal path. There's a ton of modulation in there. There's a huge mod matrix. Things are easy to assign. The oscillator section is just crazy. It's really fun to play. And then we get into the last kind of thing I want to talk about, kind of is the Arpeggiator. I'm not really a big fan of having the Arpeggiator controls on the front panel. A lot of these knobs only have like 4 positions, so it's kind of, it just feels like a waste to have a knob there. You could have like 4 buttons. I would have rather have had like the effects parameters on here, if possible, but whatever, it is what it is. The Arpeggiator is pretty popular. I'm sorry, powerful, not popular. If you hold shift and press on, you get into the kind of deeper editing for the Arpeggiator. There's phrases in here, so you don't even have like this, you don't have to stick with just the standard like up, down, random. There's actually, I think, like 64 different phrases, which are really interesting. I've got things midied up with my 707 right now, unfortunately, that's kind of throwing off the Arpeggiator. It's sending it weird clock signals. I can't really demonstrate that easily. Sorry about that, but yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good Arpeggiator. It's deeper than you think. If you just are looking at the front panel, you have to hold shift again and press the Arpeggiator on, and this brings you into a few more, menu options. It can do ratcheting per step. Here's the different phrases. Yeah, 64 phrases. There's probability and chance for like how often notes will play within that phrase. Gate length, there's swing, all kinds of good stuff like that. So overall, there's a lot to do here on the Hydrasynth. I think, as you can see, if I've shown, the fact you just select a module here and you can instantly change things with the 8 knobs. I like that way, that workflow, especially since these knobs feel really good. I don't mind the fact I'm editing with like a kind of generic interface. Normally I really like more dedicated interfaces, but I think they did a great job with this. There's a lot of flexibility too. You can change, like I have the pad set up for fretboard mode. I'm a guitar player, that layout just makes sense to me, but there's also, you can put things in an octave mode. There's just standard chromatic mode. I'll admit, the chromatic mode to me visually is kind of confusing. Like having blue be the white keys and red be the black keys just is backwards to me. So I usually stick with just fretboard mode. One of the things kind of a pain or unfortunate is that this pad mode doesn't get remembered when you power down the unit. So every time I turn it off, I have to go back into fretboard mode. Like, I'm surprised that there's no way they could just save that so it stays the same every time. In addition to changing the pad, the layout, you can change octaves. You can also select different voice scales, so you can change scales. There's a bunch in here, and you can change these as well. There's microtonal things you can do. A lot of flexibility. So yeah, I mean, it's a really well thought out synth. I think it sounds great. It's super, super easy to use. Like I said, I never even really cracked the manual for like the first month. It was just, I could power it on and like find my way around, and everything made sense. And with the exception of not being able to find like the global patch volume, like I was able to find everything I was looking for right away. It's got a couple really in-depth system settings. There's 11 pages of system settings. You can turn the Oscilloscope on or off. You can do patch protect. It's got like a light show for like sales floors. You can turn on or off. You can change the contrast. The knobs, like I said, they do have some acceleration on them. You can change the acceleration from like slow, medium, and fast. You can have tempo be the same across all your patches or be different for each patch. Knob modes. Knobs can be absolute or relative, or they do like a pass-through. They call it pickup. That's really useful for like the filters, which are not encoders. When you're playing live, you can switch patches and not instantly change your sound the second you bump the cutoff. Here you can change like the velocity curves for the pads as well as the aftertouch sensitivity. Again, there's a lot of options here. I think that the pads feel great. Like the spacing is nice too. Like I kind of feel almost like it's like a matching like a guitar fretboard in like size, so it's like really easy for me to like relate to, and I can actually get pretty expressive with it, in part because you can change all these settings in here to make it set up just the way you want to play. Like if you have like a really firm press compared to some people might have like a really light press. Clock syncings, MIDI transmit receive, all that kind of stuff. Same with the mod wheels. I don't have a mod wheel on this unit, obviously. Lots of options for sending and saving patches, NRPNs. Yes, you can calibrate the CV outputs for different modular setups. Pretty good stuff. Let's see, there's also a factory reset in there, OS version and serial number. One of the things I think I mentioned before I like is that when you save a patch, you can actually change the color of the LED rings. So again, you can kind of organize your patches by color if that's your thing. Naming patches I find to be pretty quick and easy. Just one button to kind of scroll through, you know, the characters, and then you just change them with the knob. There's also a browse mode I should talk about really quick. So you can browse by patches. You can look for just categories if you want. Let's see. You can find by patch number. I have to change this to name. There we go. So yeah, it's an easy way to do that. There's also a favorites functionality. So if you have certain presets, you know, you're going to use like sequentially, like in a live show, you can save those. I think it's like 4 banks of 8 you can save when you get into the favorites menu. I think that covers most of it. Yes, I like the synth a lot. It's a good shape. It feels really, really nice. Like that's a big deal for me these days. Like when I get a synth, especially, you know, if I'm paying over like $500-600, like I just want it to feel solid and good quality. Like I don't want to feel loose encoders and things like that. And this synth hits all of that. Like every control on here feels really solid. It feels professional. The organization, like I mentioned before, like the UI is set up really good. Everything on here is easy to find. It's easy to tweak. I think they did a really good job. I've actually read after the fact, after buying this, that like a lot of the people behind ASM are like former synth designers at other companies, and I think it shows. Like they really tried to put a lot of flexibility in sound design in a really minimal interface that's really quick to use, and I think they succeeded in that. I don't really have too many complaints about this, to be honest. Like I think for what it is, it's a great deal for the price. I mean, it's not super cheap, but considering you have like this insane amount of flexibility in how you know, craft your sounds with all the different mutators and the oscillators, and you have a ton of flexibility in your modulation sources with a huge mod matrix and so many modulation options with, you know, 5 envelopes and 5 LFOs, like I think it's well worth it. And then factor in the fact you have this playing surface that is, you know, pretty responsive, fun to play, and it transmits MPE, and you know, there's a lot of different functionality you can use in this with like a larger studio setup. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up for me. I like this a lot. No plans on selling this anytime soon. I'm going to be hanging on to it and using it intensely in my new live sets. As always, go ahead and put any questions you have about this in the comments, and I will get to them as soon as I can. Otherwise, I will probably do a long-term review after I've had this for a few more months, and we'll see what my thoughts are then. Until then, stay tuned to the channel, and I'll talk to you all soon.